各位同胞，大家晚上好。
Good evening.
今年是新加坡
This
的
year
开埠200
marks
周年。
Singapore's bicentennial.
1819年是我国发展史的
1819
转
was a
捩。
turning point in our history.
来佛士登陆
Raffles
新加坡
landed in Singapore
并
that
且在
year
这里设立了自由贸
and
易
established a free port that attracted immigrants from Southeast Asia, India, and China to seek their
我们
fortunes
的华
here.
族先辈有的来自
Many
中
of
国
our
广东
Chinese forefathers came from Guangdong,
有
Chaoshan,
的则
and
来
Fujian.
自邻近地
Some
区
came
如
from
槟
nearer
城
places
马六
like
甲
Penang,
和
Malacca,
辽宁群
and the Riau Islands.
他们刚来时
Many
大
started
多只能
as
做苦力
laborers.
勉强糊口
They worked very hard,
不过他们
barely
刻苦
able to
拼
make
搏
ends meet.
结果都
In
找
the
到
end,
立足之地
Many settled
在这
down
里
and
安
built
家
their
立
lives here.
一些后来做起小生意
Some started small
教育程度
businesses.
比较高的
The
会当
better
老师
educated among them
做记者
became teachers and
有
journalists.
些这成了大园
Some
主
became
或者创办
plantation
了银
owners,
行
founders of
贸易
banks, and traders.
他们可以说是我们
You
的
could say
开埠
they
以
were
来
our founding generation and they contributed much to Singapore.
当年的华社领袖
The leaders among
就设立
them
中乡会馆
set
的
up
商会
clan associations
帮助同乡
and trade
融入本地生
associations
活
to help people
以及
from their
协助他们
hometowns
创业
integrate and establish
这些
their
岛
businesses. These Taogays
号召
of
整
big
个华
bosses
社
also
出
rallied
钱
the
出力
Chinese community
创办
to
医
help
院和
build
学校
hospitals,
建造
schools,
庙宇
and temples for the benefit
同
of the
胞受益
community by contributing their time and money.
当时我们的先辈
Our
与自己的祖
forefathers
国保持
maintained
密切
close
的
links
关系
with their motherland at the
他
time.
们来到南洋
They
时
had arrived
只
in
把自己
Nanyang
当成
as
这里的过客
sojourners.
总有一
They
天
intended to return
业
to
归根。
China one day.
他们还是中
They
国
were
人
still people of China
也热爱
then,
着
and
自己
they
的家
were
乡
passionate about
和
their
祖国
hometowns and motherland.
并且参与中国的政治
Many
运动
participated in the political
革命与
movements
战
in
争中
China and gave their
付出了
lives
生命。
to the revolution and wars there.
100多年前
Over 100 years ago,
创立的
Dr. Sun
同盟会
Yat-sen set up the
南洋
Tongmeng
总
Hui.
支部
Its Southeast Asian headquarters was established in Singapore.
同盟会
The Tongmeng Hui dedicated its efforts to overthrowing the Qing government. Several armed uprisings were planned at Wanqingyuan.
30年代当
In the
日本入侵中国
1930s, when Japan invaded China, the Chinese community in Singapore again organized themselves, joining the anti-Japanese movement.
并号召
A prominent Chinese community leader, Tan Ka-ki, led the efforts to raise funds and organize volunteers to support the Chinese in the war. These included the Nanyang Transport Volunteers who returned to China to fight. That was one reason why the Japanese carried out the Sukching operation after they captured Singapore, to take revenge on tens of thousands of Chinese people here.
二战结束后
After World War II, the People's Republic of China was established. Against that historical backdrop, many passionate, idealistic young people in Southeast Asia were inspired by the founding of the People's Republic of China and joined local anti-colonial struggles in Southeast Asia. By that time, the identity of the overseas Chinese had become ambiguous. They were here in Nanyang physically, but for some, their hearts were in China. As a result, their loyalty was questioned, and this engendered distrust of China among Southeast Asian
从50
countries.
年代开始
From the
中国就将
1950s,
海外的
China
华人
itself started to
区分为
distinguish between
海外华侨
overseas Chinese who were 海外华侨 or the overseas Chinese nationals and 华人 who were the
海外华侨
ethnic Chinese.
指的是
海外华侨
选择
referred
保留
to
中国国
overseas
籍的人
Chinese who retained their Chinese
华人
nationality.
指的全是
华人 were
加入
ethnic
所在
Chinese
国
who had taken
国
up
籍的
their host country's citizenship.
当时的中国总理
Then Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai stated clearly that once they took up citizenship in their country of residence, they would no longer hold Chinese citizenship and should be loyal to their adopted country.
在那个时候
Our
我们的先辈
forefathers
必
had
须
to make
做
a
出
major
人生
decision.
中的重大抉择
Either they remained in Singapore or they returned to the motherland. In the end, the majority chose to remain in Singapore, and together with the other races, they built a multiracial society in an independent country. In the 1960s, as Singapore progressed towards independence, the Chinese community groups here worked with the government to drive Singapore's social and economic developments and build up our national defense. In 1967, to encourage the Chinese community to support the newly implemented national service, the Singapore Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Industry, SCCCI, presented the first 2 batches of national service recruits with medallions. From 1967, not mine because I was too young then. It was borrowed from SCCCI. I can't tell exactly what is printed on it, but the front of the medallion over here displays the crescent moon and 5 stars representing Singapore and the letters SCCCI. This was in 1967. The back of the medallion was engraved with the words National Service and 尽忠报国, which means dedication and loyalty to the country. This was a limited edition medallion with high commemorative value. In 1968, the government established the National Defense Fund to encourage citizens to donate to the cause of building up our national defense. The fundraising target was $10 million, and SCCCI alone raised more than $1 million for the fund. This showed that the local Chinese community had by then begun to see themselves as Singaporean citizens and had transferred their loyalty to Singapore. As we can see, the Chinese Singaporean identity formed gradually over more than 200 years. Our forefathers' dedication to their motherland is noble, and that spirit is something we should remember. To commemorate their deeds, we made Wan Qingyuan a national monument, and we installed a sculpture there to remember the Nanyang Transport Volunteers. This was more than 10 years ago when we did that. Similarly, to honor those who perished in the Second World War, on the 15th of February every year, all races attend the ceremony at the Civilian War Memorial. We honor those who came from different races who lost their lives and fought during the war. The tragic experience of the Japanese occupation inspired our collective national consciousness and made us determined to achieve self-rule. Malay and Indian Singaporeans have similar stories to tell about the development of their identities. They too came to Singapore as sojourners. During the period of the anti-colonial struggle, the Indians here were inspired by India's struggle for independence, and the Malays by the nationalist movements in Indonesia and Malaya. In fact, our battle cry then, Merdeka, was originally the slogan of the independence movements in Indonesia and Malaya. But despite the links they had then to their motherlands, the local Malays, Indians, and Eurasians, just like the Chinese, progressively sank their roots here, and together we developed a Singaporean identity. Even today, new immigrants have to undergo this process of integrating and identifying themselves as citizens of Singapore to whom they owe their loyalty. Now, as the world enters troubled times, Singapore will face tough challenges. Being aware of our country's history will help us understand how our national consciousness evolved. It will also help our people understand the global developments of today, as well as Singapore's position on international issues. I believe many of you are concerned about the growing tensions between the US and China. Their disagreement has placed other countries in a dilemma. No one wants to take sides, and Singapore is no exception. This is why I am discussing the tensions between the US and China and their impact on us. China has developed rapidly since its reform and opening up in the 1980s. It has risen to become the second largest economy in the world. This has significantly benefited China and the rest of the world in many ways. But China's growth has also reshaped the world order. The world's preeminent power today, the United States, has to accommodate an increasingly powerful and influential China. The US must recognize that stopping China's rise is neither possible nor wise. It also needs to seek constructive bilateral relations and interdependent economic ties with China. And as a global power itself now, China should put itself in the shoes of other countries and take into account their interests and sentiments. Only then can China live in peace and harmony with them. Only then can it be viewed as a magnanimous country, a partner willing to work with others for mutual benefits. Naturally, competition will exist between the US and China, but at the same time, both parties should also strengthen mutual trust and develop appropriate mechanisms to deal with unavoidable friction. Regrettably, and worryingly so, both China and the US have not found the magic pill to resolve their differences. Their tensions will not be resolved in the short term, and this will impact the whole world order. There are two major areas in which Singapore will be impacted. First, our relations with China and the US. Second, our economy. First, on our foreign relations. Singapore is good friends with China and also good friends with the US, and we want to remain good friends with both countries. The US is our major security partner. We buy advanced military equipment from them, including fighter aircraft and missiles. Our troops train extensively with US forces. In the US, at any one time, there are more than 1,000 Singaporean soldiers training in the US. So, we are not an allied country, but we have very extensive and close cooperation with the US forces. On counterterrorism, the two countries also have very close cooperation. We hope the US will continue to remain engaged in the Asia-Pacific region and continue to safeguard regional peace and stability. This helps to ensure the security and prosperity of the whole region. The US is also an important economic partner of ours. The value and scale of US companies' investments in Singapore far outstrip all other countries. These investments create many quality jobs for Singaporeans. We also benefit from extensive collaborations with US institutions, companies, and experts on innovation and research and development. With China, we have agreed to establish an all-round cooperative partnership progressing with the times. That's a long name, and it is very significant. We have extensive economic cooperation with China, including the 3 government-to-government initiatives. They are in Suzhou and Tianjin, and now in Chongqing. We have interconnectivity collaborations in Chongqing, and these are government-level initiatives. China is also our largest export market. Singapore companies have sizable investments in China, as Chinese companies do in Singapore. Our relations with China are unique. Apart from China itself, Singapore is the only sovereign country in the world with a majority ethnic Chinese population. Such shared heritage and culture help us to deepen our people-to-people ties and cultural exchanges. They also help to foster good relations, understanding, and partnership. But even as we engage and cooperate with each other, we must always remember that we are Singaporeans. We have our own history and culture, and also our own perspectives and positions. On international affairs, being a country with a Chinese majority can at times put us in a difficult position because our words and actions may be easily misunderstood by other countries. This is especially so when the US and China are at odds. If we support China, the US and other countries may think we do so because we are a Chinese majority country and therefore we accede to China. But if we support the US, China may also misunderstand. In fact, on occasions when Singapore and China held different views in the past, some of our friends from China asked us, since we share a common language, a common ancestry, and a common heritage, why does Singapore not share a common view? So this is a tricky issue, but also a very critical one. Our position must be clear. We must explain ourselves clearly. Our position is as follows. We must be principled in our approach and not swayed by emotion. Regardless of who we speak to, or whether we are speaking in Singapore, in Beijing, or in Washington, we hold a consistent view. When we can agree with either country, we will do so. When we cannot, we must maintain and explain our stand. We hope that other countries understand that Singapore is a multiracial and independent country with its own position on issues. And of course, Singaporeans must clearly understand what our national interests are and the government's considerations. Aside from external relations, US-China tensions will also adversely impact the world economy. Supply chains will be disrupted. Investments and R&D will be restricted. People-to-people exchanges will be constrained. Let me give you an example. The smartphones we use contain many components which are designed, manufactured, and assembled in many different countries. So if you ask where a phone is made, it actually has been made in many different countries. That is the case for the iPhones, and that is also the case for Huawei phones. However, if the US does not allow US companies to use components manufactured in China, and this allows them to sell chipsets to China, then Chinese and American companies will have to develop their own microchips, components, smartphones, and telecommunications systems. That means when we go overseas, we may have to bring multiple phones, as we did many years ago when we visited Japan, because it used the CDMA system, while Singapore adopted the GSM system. In such a bifurcated world, we would still hope to be able to communicate with all our friends conveniently. So our bigger headache is, how do we talk to every country and be friends with every country? And which telecommunication system should we install in Singapore? The Chinese one or the American one? Because the Chinese would definitely have their own. They will not accept just having one system in the world and it being one that has no part for the Chinese. Singapore's economic growth, such that Singapore is a small and open economy, has benefited much from globalization. If the US and China cannot build mutual trust, the world will be increasingly polarized. Singapore's economic growth will then be affected, and our future will be a more troubled one. Singapore companies that export extensively to China will be impacted. So too will our companies that have factories in China and export to the US. Some people think that companies that decide not to manufacture in China may then come to Singapore, but that is not the case. Some companies like these are more likely to go to countries with a much lower cost base or nearer to the US or China. For example, clothing manufacturers will likely move their factories to Vietnam or Bangladesh or Cambodia. Electronics manufacturers will likely move to Mexico, and the furniture makers will likely move to the Philippines. Such companies will not move to Singapore. Overall, if US-China relations continue to deteriorate, it is bad news for the world. And for Singapore, it is also bad news. US-China tensions are already hurting confidence worldwide, but the deeper and broader impact I spoke about will only be felt after some time. Nevertheless, we must start preparing for it now, for Singapore to adapt to these new international realities.
This year, our economic growth has slowed significantly. This is primarily due to the weakening of global demand and international trade, which has affected our manufacturing sector and trade-related services. A temporary slump in electronics has impacted our overall economic performance, particularly related sectors such as precision and engineering and wholesale trade. Retail continues to be under pressure from online shopping. Thankfully, as of now, other sectors have not been affected. Retrenchment and unemployment rates remain low. This is a matter of great concern to us. Recently, I had a discussion with NTUC Secretary General Ng Chee Meng and his labor unions leaders. They reported that while workers are worried about their livelihood, fortunately, so far the slowdown has not significantly affected jobs. Therefore, the current situation does not warrant immediate stimulus measures. But if the situation gets worse, of course we will promptly respond with appropriate interventions to sustain the livelihoods of our workers. Like our union leaders, the government is also watching very closely our economic trends. We are prepared. We have experienced cyclical downturns like this in the past, and we are confident we can take this one in our stride. Although the external environment is not sanguine, we must not forget that we have some important strengths too. Compared to other countries, our position is much better. We don't have to look very far. Just look at the Southeast Asia area, look at the other countries in Asia and the other areas. We all know there is a difference. This year, we attracted several major investments, including one by the Finnish oil company Neste. The company invested more than 2 billion Singapore dollars to expand its renewable energy plant here. This is a huge project which will create many high-quality jobs for Singaporeans. The CEO of Nestle explained that they chose Singapore because of many factors. Why? Because we have excellent geography and business environment. We have advanced technology, infrastructure, and logistics. And more importantly, we have the best workforce in the world. The company particularly has high regard for EDB's planning and support. So Nestle trusts our Economic Development Board, it trusts our workers, and it trusts Singapore. Let me quote what the CEO of Nestle said. He said, "The most valuable resource in the world is trust. But to find trust, one must earn it. And to keep trust, one must continue to earn it." And in Singapore, as Nestle said, we have found in Singapore, we found the right people that we can trust. So from this commendation, we can see that excellent reputation Singapore has among investors. Faced with uncertain future economic prospects, we need to work all the harder to maintain this trust that investors have in us. In the meantime, we will continue to improve our economic fundamentals to secure our long-term competitiveness. DPM Heng Swee Keat and the younger ministries are leading our economic transformation efforts, and these efforts are beginning to bear fruits. With the help of the government, our local companies are innovating, deploying digital technology to improve their operations, expand in overseas markets, and training for their employees. Tonight, I would like to use our favorite chili crabs. And this is a topic in our speech and not what we're going to eat afterwards. And I want to use this to illustrate the successful transformation of one company. In fact, there is much skill and management philosophy that goes into making delicious chili crabs. The Jumbo Group became well known for their chili crabs. With more than 30 years of history, it is now a listed company, and in recent years, it has also expanded overseas. Jumbo's success is due to the emphasis on training by both its boss as well as its employees. Now let us take a look at this video.
今年是第9年，如果跟外面的人讲我是厨师的话，大部分的人都不会相信我是一个厨师。一般人对厨师的印象可能要很老哦，年纪会比较大，然后可能会一个大肚腩。
因他背后有个老大，执行总厨黄仲礼。
我跟我老大的关系，他是一个我很尊敬的一个人啊，就是我从什么都不会，他把我教到一个现在的我。
我们老板比较舍得花钱投资在员工的培训方面。我这样10多年这样走来，大大小小的课程，我最少都有上了10多20个课程。他给的指示也是希望我能够在这个集团帮他带多一点年轻的厨师。
每个人都有每个人的潜能，不是每颗种子都能长成参天大树，所以就是因材施教。
这是2年前制作的一个节目。
A video produced 2 years ago. The chef who was interviewed, Ng Chi-yang, has learned much more about kitchen operations and management from his mentor, Chef Ng Chong-Lei, and has also received other forms of training. Hsien has now been promoted to one of the executive chefs and now oversees a cluster of restaurants. I'm very happy to learn that Hsien is now married He met his wife at Jumbo, and now they have 2 adorable kids. Jumbo not only serves delicious chili crabs, it also takes good care of the lifelong happiness of its employees. So keep it up. By emphasizing the nurturing and development of its staff, Jumbo has successfully retained Singaporean staff like Chong Lei and Hsien. This is a signal achievement in the food and beverage industry, which usually has a high turnover. Many Singaporeans are reluctant to join the F&B industry as the work is hard and the hours are long. But actually, if the working conditions can be improved and the employees can be well trained and the company provides opportunities for growth and progression, then working in an F&B is not a bad choice after all. In fact, the Jumbo boss, Mr. Ang Kian Ming himself, has recently gone back to school. He joined Enterprise Singapore's Scale Up SG program. Scale Up SG program is a new program to help promising local companies grow rapidly and become leaders in their fields. The pioneer batch of 25 companies in the Scaled Up were from diverse backgrounds from F&B, education, healthcare, interior design, furniture, and maintenance sectors. If we put them together, collectively, they could have provided comprehensive services for an HDB township. Through ESG, Mr. Ang and 49 other business leaders recently attended a business leadership program in the US and learned a lot of real stuff. They made friends, shared experiences, and discovered potential opportunities to collaborate. Apart from this Scale Up, there are many other government schemes to support local enterprises to develop skills. We hope employers as well as employees will take up these opportunities. There are a few reasons why I talk about Jumbo. First, to remind workers to go for training. Secondly, to encourage businesses to keep transforming, improve their operations, and globalize. And to let our companies and workers know that the government supports you fully, to give our F&B a little puff so that more people will consider joining this sector. And of course, I would not fail to remind our young people to get married early and have kids. Kids are very adorable. The more the merrier. Therefore, Jumbo is a good example, an arrow that assists many birds. In fact, I would say that it is a very comprehensive example. The actual English translation is a jumbo example. Tonight, I have taken some time to trace our history and share my views on the international situation and our economy. The government is paying close attention to the international situation and its implications for us and our economy. The high level of trust that other countries and investors have in Singapore is our key advantage. It is also our precious asset. We must safeguard this trust with care and ensure that it is passed on from generation to generation. This will ensure that Singapore can continue to prosper and provide perpetual assurance for the livelihoods of Singaporeans. My concern is that the next 10 years will be more uncertain than the last 10 years. Like the weather that is ever-changing, 1 minute it's extremely hot, and the next minute, pouring rain. We must therefore be prepared for this uncertain future, and as our forefathers, who were fearless, driven, and are united, did, overcome our difficulties together. I firmly believe that if the government and the people are united, Singaporeans will have better lives, and Singapore will continue to shine on the global stage. Thank you.